I am bothered by, let's just go to the general amount of people, a large population, that are just so willing to hand the keys over to these, I would say, diva athletes with the way that some of them are trying to get that power. I'm surprised by the amount. I'm just surprised that there seems to be such a groundswell where everyone's like, yep, okay, sure. You know, like there's no questioning it. There's no skepticism about these guys.
There's questioning it. There's just some people that believe that that's the way you should run it. Let's drill into that for a second. Do you think Russ is right about his style? Whose style is going to produce more victories? What Russ wants to do or Pete's template?
That's a tough one to answer because when Russ all of a sudden started, I think, doing max reps that he couldn't get off his chest over that 4-game stretch where he turned the football over 10 times, instead of going down a weight and then getting back up to where he was going, you could argue that the Seahawks, at the very least, got in his ear and said, no, you can't do the max reps anymore.
Right. And that would be a point that would say they shouldn't have gotten in Russell's ear, that they overreacted to the turnovers. And what was a tough stretch of games in which Russell was trying to come back from deficits, they overreacted to. And they would have been better off if they just took that as the cost of doing business in this style of football.
But they went 6-2 down the stretch. And they played defenses that were very good down the stretch. And they were 6-2 to open the season. Yes, Russell Wilson, an offense centered around him, it makes a lot of sense on the outside looking in. But it's not that simple, and I feel that with Russ, when he all of a sudden was, I think, the centerpiece of the offense, he became uncharacteristically turnover prone. And that,
but it was just for a stretch of 3-4 games, right? It was 4-game stretch in 3 games in which he committed a bunch of turnovers. And you're right, they were 6-2 down the stretch. They also shifted their offense down a gear, and when they needed to shift it up, they couldn't. They banked on, okay, let's get more conservative. We're playing teams with bad offenses. We're going to be able to sort of ham and egg our way to victories here, and they were. And when they needed it, their offense wasn't there. When they needed it against the Rams in the playoffs, and by the way, the Rams beat them while missing Aaron Donald for a half and playing broken thumb Jared Goff. Like that was bad.
Yeah, it was. Why weren't they able to put the stick back in gear? Why were they like me driving a stick shift? I mean, who is more at fault?
Oh, you can't drive a stick?
I did like a day. I honestly should have stuck with it. I hated it so much the first day.
And you quit?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I quit on that.
You quit? This is going to go in. This is going to go in the column underneath the did not catch punts when you were put in as the punt returner.
Oh, listen, your boy was a cake eater. He had an ability to drive his Uncle Len's Ford pickup truck as a kid. Whatever. Besides the point. Okay, why couldn't they get back in gear? Was it Pete or was it Russ? Because I honestly feel if you're going to look at both, I think it's more on Russ. That Russ wasn't able to get back into the groove that he had been in earlier in the year. And I know that there are some theories as to why offensive line injuries, which I know
that hurt. Yeah, Brandon Shell was out. Tyler Lockett got injured as well.
The Lockett one is a really interesting one. I think it was Eric Eager who did a piece for Pro Football Focus about the value of secondary receivers. And you're right, Ben Baldwin laid out, like, as far as it's the offensive line and that secondary receiver, Lockett. I mean, coincidentally, the last 2 years, he has probably not been 100% down the stretch.
I get that argument, but I'd also say this. Other quarterbacks deal with injuries among receivers, and Seattle has a pretty potent 1-2 punch, and DK Metcalf was healthy that whole season, and there were games that he disappeared. I think I'd tend to agree with you that it's more on the quarterback, that you count on your quarterback to be able to punch out of that. The thing that I don't know is how much the reins were actually pulled on him. How much was it Pete saying, don't turn the ball over anymore, or the insinuations, and people have heard, I've heard Jake Heaps say that Russell had less control at the line of scrimmage in that second half of the season than he did compared to the first half. Those are things that I don't know, but I would tend to agree with you that it was more on the quarterback's performance.
And if you can't turn it all the way back up, then that makes sense as to why you look at the style that, in a way, even if it is a little old school, has worked since 2012. But there's got to be a marriage of these two styles, and that's the wonder that I have, and I think it goes to some comments that we heard yesterday about how the philosophical differences and perhaps stubbornness might be getting in the way of these two meeting in the middle.
Yeah, that question. There either does need to be a marriage where they sort of recommit a renewal of vows, or you're headed for a divorce. And we're going to see which way is that's going here in the very near future. But I would agree there's a little bit of a fork in the road you can see here.